There was a time when people didn't chase food, it gathered itself. Not in factories, not in massive fields, but in quiet pockets of water where everything worked together without being forced. Fish multiplied, plants cleaned the system, animals fed into it, and somehow, it kept going. For years, even decades. No constant feeding, no daily management, no dependence on anything outside of it. Then something changed. As farming became more structured, more controlled, more industrial, systems like this slowly disappeared. Not because they stopped working, but because they didn't fit the direction everything else was going. What's strange is that the knowledge never truly vanished. It just stopped being used. But it still exists, and we will uncover all of it. Welcome to Lost Green Law. If you enjoy this kind of content, you will really help us out if you could like the video and hit that subscribe button. Thank you. Now moving on. Now the system started with water that refused to drain. You see, long before written manuals or structured farming, early communities living along floodplains, especially around China's Yellow River, kept noticing the same pattern. After seasonal floods pulled back, pockets of water remained. And inside them, fish didn't just survive, they thrived. Carp, in particular, adapted perfectly to these shallow, nutrient-rich pools. They fed on whatever the water carried: algae, plant matter, small organisms, and within months, they grew large enough to harvest. No one stocked them, no one fed them. The system was already running before humans even stepped in. So instead of clearing those pools, people began shaping them. They deepened the depressions, reinforced the edges with clay, allowed floodwater to refill them naturally. What started as trapped fish became managed ponds, not controlled environments, but guided ones. By the time of early Chinese records, these ponds were already integrated into daily life. Historical texts and archaeological evidence show that fish weren't kept separately from farming. They were part of it. Water from ponds irrigated crops. Crop residues fed the water. Nutrients cycled back and forth without needing external input. Nothing about this system came from trial and error experimentation in the way modern agriculture works. It came from watching what already functioned and deciding not to interfere with it. That's the key difference. This wasn't a breakthrough where someone designed a better way to produce food. It was the realization that food was already being produced efficiently, without us. And the smartest move was to work with that process instead of replacing it. And once that idea took hold, something shifted. Because the moment you stop trying to control a system and start understanding it, you begin to see just how much it was already doing on its own. But now the problem showed up when one species wasn't enough. For centuries, carp ponds worked because they were simple. One fish, one system. But simplicity has limits. The water would slowly accumulate waste. Uneaten material settled at the bottom, algae would spike, then crash. Productivity had a ceiling. And then farmers started noticing something important. Different fish behaved differently. Some stayed near the bottom, feeding on detritus, decaying organic matter that most species ignored. Others filtered microscopic algae suspended in the water. Some grazed on aquatic plants near the surface. They weren't competing. They were occupying completely different layers of the same environment. So instead of raising one species, they began combining them. Historical records from China describe systems where grass carp consumed vegetation, silver carp filtered algae, and common carp fed along the bottom. Each species converted a different type of waste into usable protein. Nothing built up, nothing sat unused for long. What changed wasn't just productivity, it was stability. Because once every layer of the pond had something actively feeding in it, the system started regulating itself. Algae didn't spiral out of control because something was eating it. Organic waste didn't pile up because something was breaking it down. Even nutrient distribution became more even as fish moved through different depths. This is what later became known as polyculture aquaculture, raising multiple species together so that the ecosystem handles its own balance. And it worked at a scale that surprised even early observers. By the medieval period, Chinese fish ponds weren't experimental setups. They were established, multi-generational systems producing consistent yields year after year, often with little added feed. Because once every role in the system is filled, you're no longer managing individual animals. You're maintaining a living process that keeps correcting itself. And it gets more interesting. The numbers are where this system stops sounding like a theory and starts becoming uncomfortable. Because once researchers began measuring output instead of just observing it, the gap became clear very quickly. In controlled pond studies, especially those done in the United States during the 20th century, small, well-managed fish ponds were producing hundreds of pounds of fish from areas smaller than a typical backyard. Auburn University's aquaculture research, for example, documented yields of roughly 300 to 350 pounds of fish from ponds around 1,000 square feet under basic fertilization practices. Now put that next to conventional livestock. A comparable land area used for cattle produces significantly less edible protein per year and requires continuous inputs: feed, water systems, veterinary care, fencing, and labor. Even under efficient grazing, the output per square foot simply doesn't match what water-based systems can generate. And the reason isn't complicated. Fish don't spend energy maintaining body temperature the way mammals do. They convert feed into body mass more efficiently. In polyculture systems, much of that feed isn't purchased. It's generated inside the pond itself through algae, plankton, and recycled nutrients. So instead of importing energy into the system keeps reusing what it already has. That changes the math completely. You're no longer measuring how much you can produce based on what you put in. You're measuring how efficiently a system can cycle what's already there. And when that cycle is balanced, when waste becomes input, and every layer of the environment is being used, the output starts to look disproportionate to the effort involved, which leads to a different kind of problem. Because a system that produces this much, from this little, doesn't behave like the systems most of modern agriculture is built around. You see, the system worked. That was never the problem. The problem was everything around it. As agriculture moved into the industrial era, the priority shifted from efficiency per square foot to control at scale. Crops and livestock were redesigned into systems that could be standardized, measured, and expanded across thousands of acres. Corn, soy, cattle, each one fit neatly into a model that could be replicated, financed, and distributed through centralized supply chains. Polyculture ponds didn't fit that model. They weren't uniform. Two ponds, even side by side, could behave differently depending on soil, temperature, species mix, and water flow. They required observation more than strict control, and most importantly, once established, they didn't rely on continuous external inputs in the same way industrial systems did. That made them harder to integrate into modern agricultural frameworks. In the United States, for example, agricultural policy throughout the 20th century heavily supported commodity crops and large-scale livestock production. Extension programs, subsidies, and research funding focused on systems that could increase output in standardized ways. Aquaculture research existed. Auburn University is a clear example, but it remained specialized, not widely adopted at the household level. At the same time, backyard ponds were culturally reframed. Instead of being seen as food systems, they became ornamental features: koi ponds, landscaping elements, decorative water bodies. The functional knowledge didn't disappear overnight. It just stopped being passed down in a practical context. And once a system is no longer practiced, it slowly fades from what people consider normal. So it wasn't a sudden ban that removed it. It was a gradual shift towards systems that were easier to scale, easier to control, and easier to build entire industries around, leaving behind one that quietly kept working, whether anyone paid attention to it or not. So if it's no longer part of everyday knowledge, what exactly is it that people are missing? You see, this is not a pond with fish in it. That's usually the first misunderstanding. What you're looking at, when it's working properly, is a continuous cycle of nutrients moving through different forms of life. Nothing enters the system without becoming something else inside it. Start at the surface. Sunlight hits the water and drives the growth of algae and microscopic organisms. That layer is often invisible, but it's doing most of the work. These organisms convert light and dissolved nutrients into biomass, the base of the entire food chain. Just below that, plankton feeds on that growth. Then small fish feed on the plankton. Larger fish feed on them or on other available material in the water. At the same time, organic matter, plant debris, fish waste, uneaten particles, settles toward the bottom. And it doesn't stay there. Bacteria break it down, converting waste products like ammonia into nitrates through the nitrogen cycle. Those nitrates are then absorbed by aquatic plants, cattails, submerged vegetation, floating species, which pull excess nutrients out of the water and stabilize the environment. Nothing is wasted, it just changes form. In well-established pond systems, especially traditional Asian integrated farms, this cycle is often linked with surrounding agriculture. Water from ponds is used to irrigate crops, carrying nutrients with it. Crop residues can return to the pond, feeding the lower levels of the system again. The entire setup functions as a loop. Not a perfect one, there are always variables, but a stable one when balanced correctly. And that's the key, because what you're seeing here isn't a collection of separate parts working independently. It's a system where each part exists because of the others and keeps the whole thing moving without needing constant input from outside. Which also means when something goes wrong, it doesn't happen the way you'd think. It doesn't collapse all at once. That's what makes this system deceptive. When something goes wrong, there's no immediate warning. The water still looks calm, the fish are still there, everything appears stable until it isn't. Most failures begin with oxygen. In a healthy pond, oxygen is constantly being added through plant photosynthesis during the day and natural diffusion at the surface. But that balance can shift quickly. A sudden spike in algae, followed by a die-off, can strip oxygen from the water as it decomposes. Warm temperatures make it worse because warm water holds less oxygen to begin with. When levels drop too low, fish don't die instantly. They rise toward the surface, gasping. And if the imbalance isn't corrected, losses can happen overnight. Then there's overloading. Adding too many fish, too many ducks, or too much organic input overwhelms the system's ability to process waste. Ammonia begins to build. Bacteria convert it, but only up to a point. Beyond that, toxicity increases, stressing the fish and disrupting the entire cycle. The system doesn't reject excess, it absorbs it, until it can't. Early stages are another weak point. Before the biological cycles fully establish, before bacteria colonies stabilize and plants root properly, the system is fragile. Nutrient swings are more extreme. Water clarity fluctuates. It hasn't learned to balance itself yet. And then there's seasonality. In colder months, biological activity slows. Fish feed less, plants filter less. The system is still alive, but it's no longer correcting itself at the same speed. None of these issues mean the system doesn't work, they mean it's alive. And like any living system, it depends on balance, not excess. Because when that balance is maintained, it stabilizes. But when it's pushed too far, it doesn't warn you loudly. Quite an interesting system, right? Anyway, 10 years from now, would you rather be buying your food or walking out and collecting it? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.